You want to cancel my graduation party because Chloe's feelings are hurt that people are congratulating me for actually achieving something? Wow, that is insane. Hey everybody. Today we have a crazy Reddit story about a family who decided to completely destroy their son's one moment of glory just because the golden child sister felt invisible. The sheer entitlement here is off the charts. Let's get into it. My parents canceled my graduation party for my sister's feelings. So I left, and months later, they watched my MIT success on national television, while their golden child's deception blew up in their faces. I tossed away the shiny invitation after it had sat on my workbench for 4 weeks. My high school graduation party was publicized with gold letters on heavy cream cardstock. Mom had ordered them bespoke and probably paid $210 on the wretched things. She'd presented them to me with a big, theatrical smile, acting as if she was genuinely proud of me for once. "We're inviting everyone, Jack," she had chirped. "Uncle Robert, the Hendersons, your dad's colleagues. Getting a full ride to MIT is such a massive accomplishment. I should have known better. In my house, wonderful things seldom lasted long enough to be truly enjoyed." The betrayal began on a Tuesday, exactly 8 days before graduation. I returned home from my shift at the local auto shop, hands still stained with motor oil and smelling of gasoline, to find my mother seated at the dining table with that expression on her face. You know the expression. She's about to deliver awful, gut-wrenching news, but expects you to swallow it like a good little boy and believe it's perfectly reasonable. "Jack, honey, we need to talk about the party," she said, folding her hands tightly over the polished mahogany. My stomach sank, heavy as a dead transmission. "What about it?" I asked, grabbing a towel to wipe the grease from my knuckles. "Well, your sister's been feeling really left out lately. She thinks everyone's making too big a deal about your graduation." Mom sighed, practicing her best look of maternal concern. "And honestly, your father and I have been discussing it, and we think she has a point." I just stood there, letting the words bounce around my head until they made some kind of twisted sense. I gazed at her. Chloe is 15 years old. She's a sophomore in high school. What on earth does my high school graduation and my college acceptance have to do with her? Mom sighed again, this time with a sharp edge of irritation, as if I was the one being thick-headed and difficult. "You know how sensitive she is. She's been crying in her room every night because she feels invisible. All anyone talks about anymore is you. You. Your accomplishments, your future, your scholarships. She feels like nobody cares about her anymore because you're moving on." Are you kidding me? A kid gets a full ride to MIT and the mom is mad because the 15-year-old sister is crying about not being the center of attention? That is horrible parenting skills right there. How would you guys react if your parents told you to sacrifice your biggest life achievement for a bratty sibling? I stared at the woman who raised me. "It's a graduation. It happens once in a lifetime. You want me to apologize for working my fingers to the bone to get into a top-tier engineering school? Don't be dramatic, Jack," she snapped, the sweet veneer cracking. "We just think it would be better if we postpone the party. Maybe do something smaller, quieter. Chloe suggested we could have a family dinner instead. Just the 5 of us. Wouldn't that be nicer? More intimate. The 5 of us. Mom, Dad, Chloe, me, and my younger brother Leo, who was 12, lived in his own world of video games, and couldn't care less about this toxic theater. You want to cancel my graduation party because Chloe's feelings are hurt that people are congratulating me for actually achieving something? We're not canceling it, Mom insisted, her voice rising to that shrill pitch I hated. We're postponing it. For when? I challenged, my voice dropping low and hard. After she graduates in 3 years, so she can feel special too? Mom's expression tightened into a furious scowl. You're being selfish right now. This is exactly what we're talking about. You always need to be the center of attention. You lack empathy, Jack. Sometimes, men need to learn to step back and sacrifice for the women in their family. The irony was so heavy, I could have choked on it. I had spent my entire life as the unseen child. I had never asked them for a dime, never demanded the spotlight, and quietly built my own life in the shadow of their obsession with my sister. Now, even my one moment of quiet recognition was being snatched away to coddle a teenager who threw tantrums when the wind blew in the wrong direction. I stood in that pristine, sterile kitchen, the smell of my own hard work clinging to my clothes, and let 19 years of history wash over me. I wasn't just angry about a party. I was enraged by the unbroken pattern of my existence in this house. Chloe, the surprise daughter born with perfect blonde curls and an inherent talent for manipulation, could do no wrong. When she screamed and broke dishes at 13, she was expressing her complex emotions. When I got frustrated at the same age over a broken bicycle I was trying to fix, I was showing aggressive tendencies and needed to control my temper. It was a house built on double standards. When Chloe brought home a single B on a report card full of C's, my father took the whole family out to an expensive steakhouse to celebrate her academic breakthrough. I had been on the high honor roll every single semester since middle school. I took advanced calculus and physics. The most attention I ever received for a straight-A report card was a distracted, "That's nice, son. Put it on the fridge," as Dad kept his eyes glued to the television screen watching the game. If she wanted something, it materialized. She decided she wanted to be a digital artist, and within 3 days, a $450 drawing tablet and a brand new laptop were sitting on her desk. She used them twice before abandoning them to collect dust. Meanwhile, I had worked since I was 15, mowing lawns, shoveling driveways, and finally getting hired off the books at Miller's Auto Shop, just to buy my first vehicle. It was a rusted, beat-up 1998 Chevy Silverado with a failing alternator and a dented bumper that I bought for $800. I rebuilt that engine with my own 2 hands. I paid for my own gasoline, my own insurance, and every single pair of work boots I owned. I applied to elite engineering programs across the country entirely on my own. I navigated the financial aid forms, wrote the essays late at night by the light of a single desk lamp, and got accepted into my dream school, MIT. I obtained a full-ride scholarship based on a perfect GPA, stellar test results, and a portfolio of mechanical projects I had built from scrap. I had done everything right. I had kept my head down, respected my elders, and forged my own path like a man is supposed to do. And now, they wanted to cancel my one celebration because my sister couldn't face 4 hours of people looking at me instead of her. "I'm not postponing my party," I responded, my voice eerily calm, devoid of the emotional hysterics my mother thrived on. "You already sent out the invitations. People already bought flights. Uncle Robert is driving 5 hours to get here. We'll call everyone and explain," she said, waving her hand dismissively. "They'll understand." "I don't understand," I countered. "Jack, you need to be a bigger person." My father, Richard, said as he strolled into the kitchen, his tie loosened, briefcase in hand. He had clearly been listening from the hallway. "Let Chloe have some peace. Is that really so much to ask of a young man?" Something inside of me, a rusted chain that had held my tongue for 18 years, finally snapped. "Are you actually serious right now, Dad? Chloe has had the spotlight my entire life. Every single thing she's ever wanted, she's gotten. Every mediocre accomplishment of hers gets celebrated like she cured a disease, while mine get completely ignored unless they somehow make you two look good to your country club friends. I'm going to MIT on a full scholarship. I built my own truck. I pay my own bills. And you want to cancel my party because your spoiled teenage daughter is jealous. Don't raise your voice to your mother," Dad barked, puffing his chest out. "And don't speak about your sister that way." "I'm speaking the truth," I said, holding his gaze without flinching. "I'm 18 years old. I graduated top of my class. And you're canceling my party because you don't have the spine to tell your daughter no." Dad massaged his forehead, adopting that weary, put-upon look. "Look, Jack, your mother and I already decided. We're doing a family dinner instead. Chloe needs to feel valued, too. By taking away something from me, how does that make any sense to a rational adult?" "Because you're practically a man now," Dad said, pointing a stern finger at me. "You should be mature enough to understand that sometimes we make sacrifices for family, right?" Sacrifices, I muttered. Like how you sacrificed my entire childhood to make sure she felt like a princess every second of every day. Before Dad could launch into another lecture about family duties, I turned on my heel and walked out of the kitchen. I needed air. I needed to get away from the suffocating hypocrisy of that room. As I passed Chloe's room, her door was ajar. She was sitting on the edge of her plush, overstuffed bed, scrolling through her phone. But that wasn't what stopped me dead in my tracks. What caught my eye was the brand new pair of high-end designer sneakers sitting proudly on her rug. They were limited editions, the kind of shoes I knew for a fact cost upwards of $500. Chloe didn't have a job. She didn't even have a weekly allowance that could cover a quarter of that. Then I saw it. Poking out from beneath her trash can was a familiar-looking piece of thick, textured paper. I pushed her door open, ignoring her sudden gasp of indignation, and reached down to pull the paper from the garbage. It was a torn envelope, addressed to me. The return address belonged to my grandpa Arthur in Texas. I remembered Mom telling me the mail had come earlier, but she hadn't handed me anything. I looked at the torn envelope, then at the shiny new sneakers, and the puzzle pieces snapped together with a sickening clarity. Grandpa Arthur always sent a check for major milestones. He had told me on the phone last week he was sending me something special for college. "What are you doing in my room? Get out!" Chloe shrieked, jumping off the bed. I held up the torn envelope. "Where's the check, Chloe?" Her face paled for a fraction of a second before the familiar, arrogant mask slipped back into place. "I don't know what you're talking about. Grandpa sent me a graduation gift. A check. $500, wasn't it? And now you magically have $500 shoes." I took a step toward her, my voice low and vibrating with a dangerous kind of anger. "You stole my mail. You forged my name. You stole my money." "I didn't steal it," she yelled defensively. "Mom gave it to me. I needed retail therapy. I've been so depressed and stressed out because everyone keeps talking about you going to MIT, and I needed something to make me feel better. You're getting a free ride to college anyway. You don't even need the money." The sheer audacity of her words left me momentarily speechless. I turned around and walked straight back down the stairs, clutching the torn envelope. I stormed back into the kitchen where Mom and Dad were now whispering furiously. I threw the envelope onto the mahogany table. "Care to explain why my 15-year-old sister is wearing my graduation gift on her feet?" I demanded. Mom looked at the envelope, her face flushing a deep, guilty red. Dad frowned, looking between me and my mother. "What is this about, Jack?" Chloe intercepted a letter from Grandpa addressed to me. She took the $500 check inside, forged my signature, and bought designer shoes with it. And she claims Mom gave her permission. Dad turned to Mom. "Susan, is this true?" Mom wrung her hands. "Richard." She was just so upset. "The girl has been crying for a week. She saw the mail, she saw the amount, and she made a mistake. I told her I'd replace the money for Jack eventually. It was just a temporary loan to help calm her anxiety." "A loan?" I barked. "It's federal mail theft and forgery. It's stealing." Dad held up his hands, taking on his role as the great peacemaker. "All right, let's all calm down. Jack, lower your voice. Your mother handled it poorly, but Chloe is going through a tough time emotionally. You're a smart boy, you have a full scholarship. You're not hurting for cash. Think of it as an early birthday present to your sister." I stared at the man. "Are you out of your mind? She stole from me, and you are defending her? You are telling me that I should just accept my money being stolen to coddle a thief." "Watch your mouth," Dad roared, stepping forward. "She is not a thief. She is a troubled young girl who made a bad choice. You are a grown man. Act like one. Stop being so petty over a few $100s. We give you a roof over your head, don't we? Consider that $500 rent." The absolute lack of morality, the blind, sickening favoritism. It hit me like a physical blow. They weren't just neglecting me anymore. They were actively feeding me to her. They were willing to justify actual crimes just to keep their golden child from shedding a single tear. The kitchen went dead silent. The hum of the refrigerator suddenly sounded like a jet engine. I looked at my mother, who was avoiding my eyes, staring intently at the granite countertop. I looked at my father, whose chest was still puffed out in a pathetic display of dominance. And then I heard the soft padding of footsteps. Chloe had crept down the stairs and was standing in the doorway, a smug, triumphant smirk playing on her lips. She knew she was untouchable. She knew that no matter what she did, they would shield her and punish me. "Fine," I heard myself saying. The voice didn't even sound like my own. It was too calm, too cold. The roaring inferno of anger that had been consuming me suddenly crystallized into pure, hard ice. Mom looked up, a glimmer of relief in her eyes. "Fine? You understand, honey?" "I understand perfectly," I said. "I understand that there are no rules in this house for her, and no respect in this house for me. I understand that my achievements are an inconvenience to you. I understand that you will defend a thief over a son who has never caused you a day of trouble." "Jack, I warned you about that tone," Dad threatened, his face turning a blotchy red. "Save it." I cut him off, my voice slicing through the air like a razor. "You don't get to play the tough patriarch with me anymore. You lost that right when you looked a man in the eye and told him to tolerate theft. You want to cancel the party? Consider it canceled. But don't you dare pretend this is about family sacrifice. This is about your utter failure as parents to raise a decent human being." I pointed a grease-stained finger directly at Chloe, wiping the smirk right off her face. "How dare you?" Mom gasped, clutching her pearls in a textbook display of suburban shock. "After everything we've provided for you." "Like what?" I shot back, stepping into the center of the room. "Let's lay it out, Mom. You provided basic legal necessities. Food and a bed. The absolute minimum required by law, so child services wouldn't knock on your door. Every extra cent I needed, I earned. My car, my money, my clothes for the last 3 years, my money, my college, paid for by my brain and my sweat. You don't own my achievements. You don't own me. If you're so independent, then maybe you should start acting like it," Dad yelled, finally losing his temper completely. "Maybe I will," I said. I turned my back on them and walked out of the kitchen. I didn't stomp. I didn't slam the door. I walked with the heavy, deliberate steps of a man who had finally seen the absolute truth of his reality. As I climbed the stairs, Mom began screeching something about respect and gratitude, and Chloe, realizing the tension hadn't broken in her favor, immediately began fake crying to secure her victim status. I walked down the hall to my younger brother's room. Leo was sitting on his bed, a headset around his neck, eyes wide. He had heard everything. "Jack?" he asked, his voice trembling slightly. I walked over and ruffled his hair, my calloused hand resting on his shoulder for a moment. "Keep your head down, kid. Focus on your grades. Don't let them turn you into her." "Where are you going?" "Out," I said simply. "I'll text you." I went to my own room, closed the door, and turned the lock. The click of the deadbolt felt like a gunshot marking the end of my childhood. I stood in the middle of the room I had occupied for 18 years. It was sparse. A bed, a desk, a bookshelf filled with engineering manuals and physics textbooks. No expensive toys, no posters, no clutter. It looked like a barracks. I pulled my phone from my pocket and opened my banking app. The screen illuminated the dark room. The balance sat there in bold green numbers. $8,420.50. It was the culmination of thousands of hours of turning wrenches, changing oil, enduring blistering summer heat and freezing winter mornings in the shop. I had told my parents I was saving to help with college living expenses, which was partly true. But deep down, I knew what that money really was. It was my escape fund. It was the price of my independence. It was money they couldn't touch, couldn't seize, and couldn't use to control me or buy Chloe another pair of shoes. I didn't have a fortune, but I had enough. I had enough to run. I didn't panic. Panic was for people who didn't know how an engine worked, people who didn't understand that when a system is fundamentally broken, you don't keep trying to force the gears. You dismantle it and walk away. I sat at my desk, opened my laptop, and began executing a plan I had unconsciously been formulating for years. First, I secured my assets. I transferred the entirety of my savings from the local credit union, where my parents technically still had viewing access on a joint childhood account, into a new, high-yield online bank account I had quietly opened the day I turned 18. The money vanished from their reach in a matter of seconds. Next, I pulled out a heavy-duty canvas duffel bag from my closet. I didn't pack everything. I packed like a soldier moving out. For pairs of sturdy jeans, a week's worth of shirts, my steel-toed work boots, my heavy winter jacket, and my hygiene kit. I ignored the cheap knickknacks and focused entirely on survival and forward momentum. Then came the vital documents. I pulled a fireproof lockbox from under my bed. Inside was my birth certificate, my social security card, my passport, the title to my Chevy Silverado, and a thick folder containing all my MIT admission papers and scholarship contracts. Everything that proved who I was and where I was going went into the bottom of the duffel bag. I sat on the edge of the bed, the packed bag resting by my feet. The house was quiet now, save for the muffled sound of the television downstairs. They thought they had won. They thought I was up here sulking, preparing to come down tomorrow morning and apologize for my outburst. They had no idea I was already gone. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts. There was only one person in this family I trusted. I hit the call button for Uncle Robert. Robert was Dad's older brother, a retired Marine Corps gunnery sergeant who lived a few towns over. He was a hard man, weathered and tough, who ran a successful contracting business. He had never made a secret of his disdain for how Richard and Susan raised their kids. He respected hard work, accountability, and grit, everything my parents lacked. He answered on the second ring. "Jack, what's the situation?" No pleasantries, just straight to business. "They canceled the graduation party, Uncle Rob," I said, my voice steady. "Said Chloe was feeling left out. Then I found out she stole the $500 check Grandpa sent me, forged my name, and bought shoes. Dad told me to consider it rent and to stop being petty." Silence hummed on the line for 3 long seconds. I could practically hear the gears grinding in the old Marine's head. "I'm leaving," I added. "I've got $8,000 saved. I'm packing my truck right now. I needed to let someone know I'm pulling out." "You're not sleeping in your truck, son." Robert's voice was like gravel, hard and immovable. "Pack your gear. Get in your vehicle. You drive to my place. You stay in the guest room until you ship out for Boston. Do you copy?" "Uncle Rob, I don't want to be a burden." "I didn't ask what you wanted to be. I gave you a directive," he barked, the military command slipping out effortlessly. "You are a man who earned his keep. You don't stay in a house that tolerates thieves and punishes achievers. Pack your bag. Be at my house in 45 minutes. Do not engage in a tactical retreat. Walk out the front door with your head held high." "Understood." A knot in my chest I didn't know I was carrying suddenly loosened. "Understood, sir. Drive safe. I'll have the coffee on." The line went dead. I stood up, hoisted the heavy canvas bag over my shoulder, and grabbed the folder containing my high school diploma, which the school had mailed early. I looked around the room one last time. There was no nostalgia. There was no sadness. It just looked like a hotel room I had stayed in for too long. I turned off the light, opened the door, and walked down the stairs. The wood creaked under my boots, a heavy, rhythmic sound that announced my departure to anyone listening. I reached the bottom of the stairs. The smell of roasting turkey and garlic was wafting from the kitchen. They were actually making the intimate family dinner Mom had proposed, acting as if the world was spinning exactly as they desired. I bypassed the kitchen and headed straight for the front door, the brass keys to my Silverado jingling in my hand. "Jack!" Mom's voice called out from the kitchen. She appeared in the doorway, wearing an apron, a basting brush in her hand. Her eyes dropped to the heavy canvas bag slung over my shoulder. The color drained from her face. "What on earth are you doing with that bag?" "I'm leaving," I said, my voice carrying the dead weight of absolute certainty. I didn't stop walking. I reached for the brass handle of the front door. "Out? Out where?" Mom's voice hitched, a sudden, sharp edge of panic piercing her suburban domestic facade. Dinner is almost ready. We're having turkey. I won't be here for dinner, or breakfast, or ever again. Really? I turned the deadbolt. Dad stepped out from the living room, his newspaper clutched in one fist. He took one look at me, at the bag at the open door, and his posture shifted from relaxed patriarch to an aggressive bouncer. He marched into the foyer, his face flushing crimson. You are not going anywhere, boy. Put that bag down and get back to your room. Stop being ridiculous. I'm 18, I said, looking him dead in the eye, refusing to yield a single inch of ground. I can go anywhere I damn well please. Jack Reynolds, you put that bag down right now. Mom screamed, her voice hitting that hysterical octave that used to make me cower when I was 8 years old. It didn't work anymore. It just sounded pathetic. You made your decision when you canceled my party to coddle a thief, I said, shifting the weight of the bag on my shoulder. I'm making mine. Upstairs, a door opened. Chloe appeared at the top of the landing, wearing expensive silk pajamas, looking bewildered. What is going on? Why is everyone yelling? Your brother is throwing a tantrum, Dad sneered, gesturing toward me as if I were a toddler. I'm not throwing anything, I corrected, my gaze flicking to my sister and then back to my father. I am done. I'm done being the backup child. I'm done being the ATM. I'm done being the punching bag so you two can feel like successful parents while raising a parasite. Stop pretending this is a normal family. How dare you? Mom whispered, tears finally spilling over her cheeks. After everything we've done for you. You let her steal $500 from me and told me to call it rent, I stated, the cold facts hanging in the air like a blade. Congratulations, Mom, Dad. You got exactly what you wanted. A house with just your golden child. I hope she takes care of you when you're old. Because I won't be there. I stepped out onto the porch. The cool evening air hit my face, smelling of pine and freedom. If you walk out that door, don't you ever bother coming back. Dad roared, stepping into the doorway. His fists were clenched at his sides. He looked like he wanted to hit me, but he knew I was taller now, stronger from years of hauling engine blocks, and he didn't have the nerve. He stood there, acting like the offended party, like I was the crazy one for not wanting to be robbed and humiliated. That's the plan, I said calmly. I walked down the concrete driveway to where my Chevy Silverado was parked. Mom began shrieking from the doorway, shouting something about respect and gratitude and how I was tearing the family apart. Chloe, right on cue, began wailing loudly, sobbing about how cruel I was. Dad just yelled that I would regret this, that I would fail without them. I threw my heavy canvas bag into the passenger seat, climbed into the cab, and slammed the heavy metal door shut, cutting off the noise of their dysfunction. I turned the key. The V8 engine roared to life, a deep, powerful rumble that I had tuned perfectly myself. I shifted into reverse, backed out of the driveway, and dropped it into drive. I didn't look in the rearview mirror. I didn't hesitate. I pressed the accelerator, and the truck surged forward down the suburban street. My hands were gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles were white. Adrenaline was surging through my veins, making my heart hammer against my ribs. I had to pull over into a vacant strip mall parking lot halfway to Uncle Robert's house just to breathe. I sat there in the idling truck, the dashboard lights casting a dim green glow, and waited for the guilt to hit. I waited for the sadness, the regret, the fear of the unknown. It never came. Instead, a profound, overwhelming sense of peace washed over me. The invisible weight I had carried on my shoulders for 18 years was gone. By the time I pulled into Uncle Robert's gravel driveway, my phone was blowing up. I parked the truck and looked at the screen. 32 missed calls. A barrage of texts from Mom. You're tearing this family apart. Come back right now. Texts from Dad. This is what we get for raising an arrogant, ungrateful son. Don't expect a dime from us for college. A text from Chloe. I hope you're happy, psycho. Mom hasn't stopped crying. Wait, what? They literally pushed him out the door, screamed at him to never come back, and then have the nerve to text him saying he is tearing the family apart? The gaslighting here is wild. Some people simply do not deserve to be parents. Thank God Uncle Robert was there to take him in. I deleted the threads. Then one more message popped up. It was from Leo. Are you okay, Jack? Please don't hate me. My chest tightened. I typed back immediately. I'm safe, buddy. I could never hate you. This isn't about you. Keep your head down. I'll see you soon. Promise. I grabbed my bag and walked up to the porch. Before I could even knock, the door swung open. Uncle Robert stood there, wearing a faded USMC t-shirt and holding 2 mugs of black coffee. He looked at my truck, looked at my bag, and then looked me in the eye. You did the right thing, son, he said, his voice a steady, grounding force. Come on inside. We've got work to do. Graduation day arrived with a bright, cloudless sky, mocking the dark storm that had torn through my family a week prior. I walked across the stage wearing my cap and gown, shook the principal's hand, and accepted my high school diploma. I had graduated at the top of my class, a fact the announcer made sure to highlight. When my name was called, a booming, solitary cheer erupted from the middle of the bleachers. It was Uncle Robert, standing tall, clapping hard enough to echo across the football field. It should have felt incomplete without my parents there to watch me cross that threshold. But as I looked out at the sea of families, taking photos and holding balloons, I realized I didn't feel abandoned. I felt liberated. I later discovered through a mutual acquaintance that my parents hadn't simply stayed home in protest. They had taken Chloe to a luxury day spa 2 towns over. Apparently, the stress of my leaving had triggered a massive migraine for her, and she needed a deep tissue massage and a facial to recover from the trauma of her brother refusing to be stolen from. They had spent my graduation day validating a thief. It was all the closure I needed. Oh my God. They skipped his high school graduation and went to a spa to reward the sister? That is so obnoxious. They literally spent the day validating a toxic teenager instead of supporting their hardworking son. I would have never spoken to them again either. The summer stretched out before me, hot and grueling. I threw myself into my work at the auto shop, picking up every available shift. I worked 12-hour days, 6 days a week. My hands were perpetually calloused, my knuckles scraped, and my clothes smelled of grease and hard labor. But every dollar I earned went straight into my secure account. I was building a fortress, brick by brick, dollar by dollar. Uncle Robert became the father figure I never truly had. He didn't hover and he didn't coddle. He taught me how to properly sharpen a lawnmower blade, how to change the oil on his diesel generator, and most importantly, he taught me about the invisible chains of family trauma. One humid evening in July, we were sitting on his back porch, the crickets chirping loudly in the tall grass. He handed me a cold bottle of beer, my first, and looked out into the yard. You think your dad is just blind, don't you? Robert asked, his voice low and gravelly. You think he doesn't see what Chloe is? I think he doesn't care, I replied, taking a sip. It was bitter, but it felt like a rite of passage. As long as she plays the part of the helpless princess, he gets to be the hero. Robert shook his head slowly. It goes deeper than that, Jack. Your grandfather, my dad, was a hard man. He favored me. I was the athlete, the one who joined the corps, the one who could fix a tractor blindfolded. Richard, your dad, he was the quiet one. He wasn't good with his hands. He liked reading. My dad used to mock him for it, ignored his achievements completely, left him to the side. I stared at Robert, the puzzle pieces slowly shifting into a new configuration. So because Grandpa ignored him? Exactly, Robert nodded. When your parents had you, Richard saw a tough, quiet kid who liked getting his hands dirty. He saw me. He saw the brother who overshadowed him. Then they had Chloe, the sweet, delicate little girl. She became his do-over. He poured every ounce of validation he never got into her. And your mother, well, she just liked having a living doll to dress up and parade around. They turned her into a monster because they were too busy trying to heal their own childhood wounds to actually parent her. And they made you the scapegoat. The weight of that understanding descended on me like a physical blanket. It wasn't fair, and it certainly wasn't an excuse for allowing her to steal from me or canceling my graduation party. But it was a blueprint. It showed me that the cycle was hardwired into their psychology. They might never wake up one day and realize what they had done. They might never apologize. "How do you deal with the anger?" I asked, looking down at my scarred hands. "You use it," Robert said simply. "You let it fuel the fire in your belly. But you don't let it consume you. You make your life so damn successful, so rich and independent, that the people who tried to hold you back become nothing more than a footnote in your history. You build a life they can't touch. And that is exactly what I intended to do." In late August, Uncle Robert helped me pack my Chevy Silverado, shook my hand firmly, and told me to make him proud. I drove away from my hometown without looking in the rearview mirror. The long drive up the coast to Massachusetts felt like shedding an old skin. MIT was everything I imagined it would be and more. The campus buzzed with a kind of electric energy I had never experienced. My classes were brutal, demanding every ounce of my intellect and focus. I was surrounded by brilliant minds, but I quickly realized I had an edge. While many of my peers were theoretical geniuses, they struggled when it came to practical application. They could design a flawless robotic arm on a computer, but they had no idea how to actually machine the aluminum or troubleshoot a seized servo motor. I did. Years of rebuilding transmissions and improvising repairs on rusted trucks gave me a profound, hands-on understanding of mechanics. I made friends easily. My roommate, Mark, was a software engineering prodigy from Chicago who lived on black coffee and pizza. We bonded over late-night study sessions and a shared hatred for mandatory humanities electives. I found a real family among my peers, people who respected me for my work ethic and what I brought to the table, not for what I could do to make them look good. My biological parents tried to maintain the illusion of a relationship during those first few months. They sent awkward, surface-level text messages asking how the weather was. In October, Mom sent a care package. It sat on my desk for 3 days before I opened it. Inside was a cheap, generic Boston t-shirt that felt like sandpaper, a few packs of stale crackers, and a framed photograph of our family from 4 years ago. I looked at the picture. We were standing in front of a Christmas tree. Chloe was front and center, wearing a brand new dress, beaming at the camera. Dad had his hand proudly on her shoulder. I was standing slightly off to the side, wearing an old sweater, forcing a half-smile. I didn't feel sad looking at it. I didn't cry. I felt completely detached, like I was looking at strangers in a magazine. I gave the crackers to Mark, used the shirt as an oil rag for my bike, and tossed the photograph into a drawer. I didn't need the reminder. My major breakthrough happened 6 months into my freshman year. I had applied for a position in a high-tech robotics lab on campus. It was a highly coveted spot, strictly reserved for juniors and seniors. Freshmen weren't even supposed to get past the initial email screening. But I had attached a portfolio of my personal mechanical projects, including the schematics of the engine I had rebuilt and a custom pneumatic lift I had designed for Miller's Auto Shop. The head of the lab, Professor Vance, called me in for an interview. He was a notoriously tough instructor who didn't suffer fools. He looked at my grease-stained fingernails and calloused hands, then fired a series of complex mechanical troubleshooting questions at me. I answered them not with textbook theories, but with the practical, gritty reality of how metal and grease actually behave under stress. "You know how to get your hands dirty, Mr. Reynolds?" Professor Vance noted, tapping my file. "I have a lab full of kids who can code an AI, but they don't know which end of a wrench to hold. You start on Monday. Don't make me regret this." Not only did I get the position, but it came with a massive stipend that covered my remaining living expenses. At 19 years old, I was working on advanced biomechanical prosthetics for a project funded by a federal grant. I was gaining experience that graduate students fought tooth and nail for. I made a modest post on LinkedIn and Facebook, sharing a photo of myself in the lab, holding a piece of machined titanium, wearing my official MIT research badge. Honored to join the Advanced Biomechanics Lab as a freshman researcher. Hard work pays off. The response from my friends, former teachers, and Uncle Robert was overwhelming. Uncle Robert just commented, Knew you had it in you. Keep pushing. My parents, however, remained entirely silent on the post. No likes, no comments, nothing. I knew they had seen it. Uncle Robert told me Dad had spent 20 minutes staring at his phone during a family barbecue. But acknowledging my success publicly would mean admitting I didn't need them, and worse, it would take the spotlight away from Chloe's latest drama regarding her high school cheerleading squad. I smiled, closed my laptop, and went back to work. I was thriving, and that was the ultimate revenge. The real explosion didn't happen until April, right before spring finals. My research team in the robotics lab made a significant breakthrough on a localized tactile feedback loop for a prosthetic hand. Professor Vance was so impressed with a specific mechanical linkage I had designed that he insisted my name be listed as a co-author on the preliminary paper we submitted to a major engineering journal. MIT's official public relations department picked up the story. They ran a feature on the university's homepage about the project, heavily highlighting the fact that a freshman from a small, blue-collar town had designed the critical component. The headline read, "From auto shop to advanced robotics, MIT freshman innovates prosthetic design. The internet moves fast, but small-town gossip moves faster." My hometown's local news outlet caught wind of the MIT article and republished it on their front page. Suddenly, the narrative wasn't about the quiet kid who ran away from his family. It was about the local boy genius making national waves. The article detailed my scholarship, my lab position, and quoted Professor Vance calling my mechanical intuition extraordinary. My phone turned into a buzzing nightmare. Everyone wanted a piece of the action. High school classmates who had never spoken 2 words to me suddenly sent messages saying how they always knew I was a genius. Neighbors from 3 streets over were tagging me in posts, claiming they remembered me fixing their lawnmowers. It was the height of hypocrisy, but I mostly ignored it. And then the call came. I was in my dorm room, eating cold pizza with Mark, when my phone screen lit up with Mom's name. I stared at it, letting it ring 4 times before my curiosity finally overrode my disgust. I hit accept. "Hello," I answered, my voice flat. "Jack." "Oh, my goodness, sweetie. How are you?" Her voice was dripping with a sugary sweetness that made my teeth ache. It was the exact tone she used when she was trying to impress the country club wives. "I'm fine. Busy." "We saw the article." "The whole town saw the article, Jack. It was on the front page of the local paper. Your father and we are just bursting with pride." I almost laughed. "Are you? That's funny. You didn't seem too proud when you were defending Chloe for stealing my money, or when you told me not to come back." She audibly choked, the sweet facade faltering for a split second before she forced it back into place. "Oh, honey, the past is the past. We were all just highly emotional back then. Families fight, but we are your parents, and we love you. Listen, spring break is coming up next week. Your father and I were talking, and we want to throw a massive celebration for you here at the house. We want to invite everyone. The Hendersons, the mayor, everyone. A proper party to celebrate our MIT boy." There it was, the naked truth of her motivation. She didn't want to celebrate me. She wanted to use me as a trophy. She wanted to stand in her living room, pouring expensive wine for her friends, and brag about the son she had driven away. She wanted the social capital of my success. Now that I was shiny and impressive, I was worthy of the dining room table again. "You want to throw me a party?" I repeated, making sure I heard the sheer audacity correctly. "Yes, a belated graduation and congratulatory party. It will be beautiful, Jack. Chloe is even excited to help decorate." The mention of Chloe's name sent a cold spike of anger through me. "No, thanks." "No? Jack, please don't be stubborn. Everyone is dying to see you." I said, "No, Mom. I'm busy. Mark and a few guys from the lab are driving up to a cabin in the mountains for spring break. We've had it planned for months." "You're choosing your friends over your own family?" The shrill, victimized tone was returning. "After we offered to do this huge thing for you? You didn't offer to do anything for me," I said, my voice hardening into steel. "You offered to throw a party for yourselves. And frankly, I prefer the company of people who don't steal my mail or lie to my face. Furthermore, if I want a party, I'll pay for it myself. With my own money, the money I earned. Jack Reynolds, you are being incredibly ungrateful. Have a nice life, Mom. Don't call me again. I pulled the phone away from my ear and hit end call. Mark looked up from his laptop, raising an eyebrow. Family drama? Just taking out the trash, I said, grabbing another slice of pizza. So, about that cabin. Are we packing the grill or buying one up there? Rejecting my mother's transparent attempt to use my success as a social prop was the spark that finally ignited the powder keg back home. 2 days later, my phone rang again. This time, it wasn't Mom trying to play the doting parent. It was Chloe, and she was absolutely unhinged. Are you happy now, you arrogant sociopath? She screamed the second I answered the phone. I had to hold the receiver an inch away from my ear. Hello to you too, Chloe, I replied, leaning back in my desk chair. Don't play cute with me. You think you're so amazing because you got your name in some stupid article? Do you have any idea what it's been like here? Everyone, literally everyone, will not shut up about you. Oh, how is Jack doing at MIT? Oh, Jack is so brilliant. Nobody even asks about my cheerleading tryouts anymore. You sucked all the oxygen out of this family, and you aren't even here. Couldn't help it. I laughed. A genuine, deep laugh. Chloe, you are 15 years old and your biggest problem is that people are recognizing my hard work instead of your hobbies. You have lived your entire life as the center of the universe. Welcome to the real world, where you actually have to achieve something to get noticed. You ruined my life, she shrieked, her voice cracking. You abandoned us because you're a selfish, narcissistic jerk. And I'm going to make sure everyone knows the truth about you. She hung up before I could reply. I figured she was just throwing another one of her trademark tantrums. I underestimated her malice. The next morning, I woke up to 74 notifications on Facebook. My stomach dropped. I opened the app to find that Chloe had written a massive, multi-paragraph post and tagged me in it, ensuring all my friends, family, and our entire hometown saw it. It was a masterclass in manipulation. She had typed out a tearful, agonizing story about how my recent success was built on a foundation of lies. She claimed that the reason I left home wasn't because of a canceled party, but because I had secretly drained her college savings account to fund my move to Boston. She painted me as an abusive, arrogant brother who had terrorized the family, demanding to be the center of attention, and finally abandoning my loving parents, leaving them heartbroken and financially ruined. She ended the post with, "Please don't believe the articles. My brother is a monster who stole my future to build his own. Pray for my family." The initial reaction was a disaster. People love a fall from grace story. Acquaintances were leaving shocked comments. A few distant relatives commented about how disappointed they were in me. The rumor mill was spinning at light speed, and for a terrifying 10 minutes, I thought my reputation might actually be damaged. Then came the twist. The tactical nuke I didn't even have to drop myself. Uncle Robert entered the chat. He didn't just comment. He brought receipts. Robert replied directly to Chloe's post with a public response that was cold, calculated, and utterly devastating. "Chloe, delete this lie immediately," Robert wrote. "Since you want to talk about theft publicly, let's show the good people of this town the actual truth." Attached to his comment was a high-resolution photograph. It was a copy of the front and back of the $500 check from Grandpa Arthur. The back clearly showed my name, Jack Reynolds, forged in Chloe's distinct, loopy handwriting. Underneath it was a screenshot of a text message from my mother to Robert from the night I left, stating, "Richard told Jack to just let Chloe keep the $500 she took because she was stressed, and now Jack is throwing a fit and leaving. Talk some sense into him." Robert continued, "Jack left because his parents canceled his graduation party to coddle your jealousy, and then demanded he allow you to steal his graduation money to buy designer shoes. Jack didn't steal a dime. He worked 12-hour shifts at Miller's Auto to afford his move. He earned a full scholarship to MIT. You, on the other hand, committed federal mail theft and forgery. Should I post the police report number I threatened your parents with to get them to admit it? The internet went dead silent for about 3 minutes. And then the floodgates opened. Mr. Harrison, my high school physics teacher, chimed in. I taught Jack for 2 years. He is the most honorable, hardworking young man I've ever met. I also witnessed his parents completely ignore him at every parent-teacher conference. Shame on you, Chloe. Parents from the neighborhood who had quietly observed the blatant favoritism for years suddenly felt emboldened to speak up. They shared stories of seeing me fixing the roof in the rain while Chloe was driven to the mall. The tide turned with vicious speed. The town didn't just turn on Chloe. They turned on my parents for enabling such monstrous behavior and allowing her to publicly defame a successful kid. Chloe's post was deleted less than 24 hours later. But the screenshots were forever. Their perfect country club image was permanently shattered. The golden child had been exposed as a petty thief, and the doting parents as negligent enablers. I didn't gloat. I didn't post a follow-up. I simply went back to the lab, tightened a few bolts on a robotic hand, and let my family drown in the public relations nightmare they had created for themselves. The silence from my parents' end was deafening. There were no more fake sweet phone calls. There were no more invitations to spring break. They had been thoroughly, publicly humiliated by the truth, and they had retreated into their shell. A year passed. I finished my sophomore year with straight A's and accepted a paid summer internship at a major aerospace engineering firm in Boston. I was 20 years old, completely financially independent, and building a resume that commanded respect. In late July, I flew back to my home state, but not to visit my parents. I rented a U-Haul truck and drove to Uncle Robert's house. I still had several boxes of childhood mementos, old books, and winter gear stored in his basement, and it was finally time to move them permanently to my new apartment in Massachusetts. Uncle Robert helped me load the boxes. We were just finishing up when a car pulled into the driveway. It wasn't my parents' luxury SUV. It was an older sedan. The door opened, and out stepped Leo. He was 14 now, taller, his shoulders broadening out. He ran up the driveway and nearly tackled me with a hug. Jack, you got huge. Leo laughed, stepping back to look at me. So did you, kid? I smiled, gripping his shoulder. Who drove you? Mom and Dad are in town picking up supplies for the house. I begged them to let me stop here to see you when I heard from Uncle Rob you were coming down. We sat on the tailgate of the U-Haul, drinking sodas and catching up. Leo told me about his grades, his new interest in coding, and how quiet the house had become. He didn't complain, but his eyes carried a heavy understanding. It's been crazy since that Facebook thing, Leo muttered, looking down at his sneakers. Mom barely goes to her book club anymore. People talk. Chloe threw a fit and locked herself in her room for a month. She still blames you for ruining her life. I'm sorry you have to live in that crossfire, Leo. It's fine, he shrugged, looking at me with a maturity beyond his years. You're the only normal one in our family, Jack. I understand why you had to leave. I'm gonna get out too, soon as I'm 18. Before I could reply, a sleek silver SUV slowly rolled down Uncle Robert Street and parked at the end of the driveway. My chest tightened. It was them. Dad and Mom stepped out of the vehicle. They looked drastically different from the arrogant, perfectly manicured couple I had left behind 2 years ago. Dad looked haggard, his posture slightly stooped, the faux confidence completely drained from his face. Mom looked exhausted, her makeup failing to hide the deep bags under her eyes. The public shame of Robert's exposure had clearly taken a heavy toll on their socialite lifestyle. They walked up the driveway slowly, hesitantly, like soldiers approaching a minefield. Uncle Robert stepped out onto the porch, arms crossed, his face a mask of cold granite. Jack, Dad said, his voice lacking its usual booming authority. We saw you were in town. We wanted to see you. You see me? I said flatly, not moving from the tailgate. Mom stepped forward, wringing her hands in that familiar, nervous gesture. Her eyes welled with tears, but this time, I knew they weren't entirely fake. They were the tears of someone who realized they had bet on the wrong horse and lost everything. Jack, honey, we miss you so much. The house is so empty without you. We know things got out of hand. Out of hand, I repeated, the ice in my veins chilling my words. We made mistakes, Dad interjected, trying to sound reasonable. Parents aren't perfect, Jack. We misjudged the situation with Chloe. We were stressed. We handled the graduation party poorly. But holding this grudge, it's tearing your mother apart. Every family makes mistakes. You need to be forgiving. You need to let it go so we can be a family again. Wow. The audacity of these people. Now they want to play the victims? Parents aren't perfect, we made mistakes. No, you didn't make a mistake. You made a deliberate choice. They are just mad that Uncle Robert exposed their fake perfect image to the neighborhood. I stared at the two people who had brought me into this world. They still didn't get it. Even after being publicly exposed, even after losing a son, they were still trying to minimize their actions. They were still using passive language. Mistakes. Poorly handled. They refused to carry the weight of their own malice. I stood up from the tailgate. I towered over my father now, not just in height, but in the sheer weight of the life I had built with my own two hands. You didn't make mistakes, I said, my voice cutting through the humid summer air with absolute, unyielding clarity. Dropping a plate is a mistake. Forgetting to pick up milk is a mistake. What you did was make a series of calculated choices. You chose to ignore my achievements for 18 years. You chose to cancel the one day meant to celebrate my hard work so your spoiled daughter wouldn't have to share the spotlight. You chose to look me in the eye and tell me that allowing her to steal $500 from me was the price of living in your house. Dad flinched as if I had struck him. Mom covered her mouth, a sob escaping her lips. You didn't misjudge a situation, I continued relentlessly. You deliberately sacrificed my dignity to feed her ego. You thought because I was quiet, because I was a boy who just put his head down and worked, that I would tolerate being a second-class citizen in my own home forever. You chose to cultivate a toxic golden child, and you chose to throw me away. And when I succeeded without you, you chose to try and use my name to rebuild your shattered social standing. Jack, please, Mom wept, reaching a hand out toward me. We're sorry. We are so sorry. Please come home. I am home, I said, gesturing to the U-Haul, to Uncle Robert on the porch, to my own 2 feet standing firmly on the ground. Home is where you are respected. Home is where people don't demand you shrink yourself to make them comfortable. You aren't sorry for what you did to me. You are sorry that Uncle Robert exposed your hypocrisy to the neighborhood. You are sorry that your country club friends look at you differently now. You are sorry you got caught. Dad's jaw clenched. So that's it? You're just going to cut us off forever? Turn your back on your own flesh and blood. You turned your back on me the day Chloe was born? I replied, feeling no anger anymore, only a profound, unshakable indifference. I just finally had the self-respect to walk in the direction you pushed me. I turned away from them and looked at Leo. The kid was watching the exchange with wide eyes, absorbing every word. I knelt slightly so we were eye to eye. Listen to me, Leo, I said softly, ignoring the weeping woman and the defeated man standing a few yards away. You keep your grades up. You learn a trade or you learn to code, whatever you want. But you build your own foundation. When you turn 18, if you need a place to go, you call me. I have an apartment in Boston. There will always be a room for you. You don't have to stay in the shadow. Leo nodded fiercely, swiping quickly at his eyes. I will, Jack. I promise. I stood up, ruffled his hair one last time, and walked around to the driver's side of the U-Haul. I didn't look back at Richard or Susan. I had said everything that ever needed to be said. I climbed into the cab, the heavy door slamming shut with a satisfying, final thud. Uncle Robert walked down from the porch and climbed into the passenger seat. He looked over at me, a proud, quiet smile on his weathered face. You handled that like a man, Jack. Thanks, Uncle Rob, I said, turning the key in the ignition. The engine roared to life, a heavy, mechanical heartbeat that drowned out the sound of my mother crying in the driveway. I shifted the truck into gear and pulled out onto the road. As we merged onto the highway, heading north toward Massachusetts, the late afternoon sun began to set, casting a golden light across the dashboard. I looked at the open road ahead of me. I had a degree to finish, a career to build, and a life entirely of my own waiting for me. I had lost a family, but I had gained myself. And for the first time in my life, I was exactly where I was supposed to be. I pressed the accelerator, the engine humming perfectly, and drove into the sunset, leaving the ghosts of my past in the rearview mirror forever. Wow, that was an incredibly intense story. Jack handled this whole nightmare like an absolute boss. I am so sick of these parents cultivating a toxic golden child while treating their hardworking kids like garbage. They bet on the wrong horse, nurtured a manipulator, and completely threw away a son who was building a life with his own two hands. And the fact that they only came crying back to him after their social standing was ruined? That just proves they learned absolutely nothing. Jack was completely right. Dropping a plate is a mistake, but ignoring your kid for 18 years is a calculated choice. User Automechanic22 says, Jack is an absolute legend. The way he told his parents off at the end was so satisfying. Hey Automechanic22, I am right there with you. It was cold, but it was so deserved. He didn't even yell, he just laid out the absolute truth and walked away. Perfect revenge. User DramaQueen00 says, I think Jack was being a little too harsh. They are his parents after all. Maybe they just made a bad call under pressure? A bad call? Are you serious, DramaQueen00? They skipped his MIT graduation to take the sister to a luxury spa. There is absolutely no excuse for that kind of behavior. They only came back because they got publicly shamed. Jack owes them nothing. User Realist Mind says, Uncle Robert is the real MVP of this story. Everyone needs an Uncle Robert in their lives. Spot on, Realist Mind. Uncle Robert saw right through the parents' BS and stepped up to be the father Jack actually needed. That solitary cheer at graduation was everything.